Every quality management system needs boundaries, not to limit you, but to focus you. Clause 4.3 is where you draw the lines, defining exactly what your QMS covers, what it doesn't, and why. Get this right, and your entire system has clarity. Get it wrong, and auditors will have questions. Welcome back to ISO Decoded. I'm Ahmed M. Ibrahim, and this is episode 4. Over the past 2 weeks, we have built the intelligence layer of your QMS. Episode 2 covered the organizational context, the internal and external issues. Episode 3 covered your interested parties and their requirements. Today, we bring these two inputs together into a critical output, the scope of your quality management system. Clause 4.3 is where you formally define what your QMS covers. It determines the boundaries and the applicability of your quality management system. And this is one of the few places where ISO 9001 explicitly requires documented information. Let's look at the standard requires. Clause 4.3 states that the organization shall determine the boundaries and applicability of the quality management system to establish its scope. When determining the scope, the organization shall consider the external and internal issues referred to in Clause 4.1 and the requirements of the relevant interested parties, referred to in Clause 4.2. The scope shall be available and be maintained as documented information. This is important. The scope statement is a required document. Your scope should state the types of products and services covered, and it should provide justification for any requirement of the standard that the organization determines is not applicable. Now, here is a crucial distinction. ISO 9001-2015 replaced the old concept of exclusions from the 2008 version with a new concept of applicability. In the prior version, you could only exclude requirements from Clause 7. In the current version, an organization that cannot apply one or more specific requirements based on the nature of the organization and its product can consider them for non-applicability. However, any such determination must be justified, and it must not affect the organization's ability or responsibility to ensure the conformity of products and services. So, how do you write a good scope statement? Let me give you a framework. Our written scope statement should answer four questions. What products and services does your QMS cover? What locations or sites are included? What processes are within the boundaries? And are there any requirements you have determined to be not applicable? And if so, why? Here is an example for a manufacturing company. The scope of the quality management system covers the design, manufacture, and distribution of precision automotive components to facilities in Detroit, Michigan, and Monterrey, Mexico. Clause 8.3 Design and development is fully applicable as the organization performs product design. And here's an example for a services firm. The scope covers the provision of IT consulting and managed services from our headquarters in London, UK. Clause 8.3 Design and development has been determined as not applicable, as the organization does not design proprietary products or services. All service specifications are determined by client requirements. Notice the key elements: clear products or services, defined locations, and explicit applicability statements with justifications. For many organizations, the QMS applies to all products, services, processes, and locations, as the auditing practices group notes. For many organizations, the QMS applies to all its products and services, includes all the processes performed at defined locations with established resources, including people. In this case, the scope is straightforward. Complexity arises when only part of the organization is certified. Here is something that trips up a lot of organizations. The QMS scope and the certification scope are not necessarily the same thing. Your QMS scope is what you define the boundaries of your quality management system as maintained in your documented information. Your certification scope is what appears on your certificate. It is usually a statement that describes the type of activities, products, and services. A customer or end user must be able to discern what is covered by looking at your certificate. The certification scope can be narrower than the QMS scope. For example, you might implement ISO 9001 across your entire organization, but only certify certain product lines or locations. However, the certification scope cannot be broader than the QMS scope. You cannot certify what you have not implemented. This distinction matters when organizations are expanding. If you add a new service line or open a new location, your QMS scope should be updated and your next surveillance audit should address whether the certification scope needs to be changed. The audit scope is yet another dimension. This refers to the extent and boundaries of the specific audit, which locations, functions, and time period are covered during that particular audit event. Understanding these three layers of scope prevents confusion during audits. Quick audit survival tips for Clause 4.3. Step 1. Make sure your documented scope is current and accessible. If an auditor asks to see your scope and you cannot produce it quickly, that is a finding waiting to happen. Step 2. Ensure your scope aligns with reality. If your scope says you design products, but you actually only manufacture to customer specifications, there is a disconnect that auditors will probe. Step 3. If you claim non-applicability for any clause, be prepared to justify it thoroughly. An auditor will test whether the justification is valid, claiming design and development is not applicable, while you clearly designing custom solutions will raise a nonconformity. Step 4. Remember that scope can change. As your organization evolves, new products, new markets, new sites, revisit and update your scope. The standard says the scope shall be maintained, which implies it is a living document. Tip 5. If you operate at multiple sites, be very clear about which sites are included. Ambiguity here creates audit complications. To wrap up, Clause 4.3 is about clarity and boundaries. Your scope defines what your QMS covers, must be maintained as documented information, and should clearly state your products, services, locations, and any non-applicable requirements with justification. Understand the distinction between QMS scope, certification scope, and audit scope. With clauses 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3 now covered, we have established the foundation of your quality management system. You know your context, you know your stakeholders, and you know your boundaries. Next week in episode 5, we complete clause 4 with big 1. Clause 4.4 Quality Management System and its processes. This is where we define the actual processes that make your QMS work. It is the engine room of the standard. Subscribe, review, and share. Every episode brings you closer to mastering ISO 9001. Until next week, keep decoding quality.